You feel the rough grain of the wooden handle against your palms as you execute a strike for the 1000th time. Your movement is elegant, your weight shift is mathematically perfect, and your mind is filled with the high-level strategies of the world's greatest masters. You feel like a warrior. But then, 30 minutes into the session, a dull ache begins in your forearms. An hour later, your shoulders feel as though they are filled with hot lead. By the second hour, your fingers begin to unclench against your will. You are experiencing the silent betrayal of an unconditioned body, a reality that turns even the most perfect technique into nothing more than a beautiful way to lose. But here is the part most people miss. You assume that skill is the primary factor in any high-stakes pursuit, whether it is a physical confrontation or the mental endurance required for your career. You believe that if you just study enough, practice the forms enough, and refine your technique, you will be ready when the pressure peaks. That assumption sounds logical until you look closer. In the spring of 1598, a young samurai named Renjiro believed this implicitly. At 23 years old, he was the most gifted student his dojo had seen in 2 generations. He could recite the Book of 5 Rings from memory. His overhead strike was so flawless it was used as a demonstration for new recruits. His master, Yamada, had spent years refining Renjiro's form, often remarking that physical strength was for peasants, and that a true samurai won through superior technique and spirit. This sounds like an inspiring ideal, but it ignores the brutal biological reality of how the human body actually functions under prolonged stress. The data doesn't fail, our interpretation does. We often interpret failure as a lack of talent or a flaw in our strategy, but the risk quietly increases the longer a battle lasts. Renjiro was sent to real war, and for the first hour, he was a god on the battlefield.
His technique allowed him to cut through opponents with minimal effort. But real combat is not a 5-minute dojo match. It is an hours-long test of systemic endurance. By hour 3, Renjiro's hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold his sword. By hour 4, he encountered an ashigaru, a common foot soldier with 0 formal training and clumsy technique. In a dojo, Renjiro would have defeated him in seconds. But the ashigaru had spent his life in the fields, hauling grain and tilling soil. His body was a forged engine of endurance. Renjiro attempted a technically perfect counterstrike, but his nervous system was depleted. His muscles didn't have the cellular energy to contract, and his arms moved as if they were submerged in thick oil. The foot soldier sidestepped the slow, weak blade and ended Renjiro's life. He didn't die because his technique failed. He died because his body quit while his mind was still trying to fight. This is where the concept of Hojo Undo, or supplementary training, becomes a matter of life and death. While Renjiro was polishing his forms, other veteran warriors were in the woods, twisting heavy stone weights called chiishi and swinging massive iron staffs known as tetsubo. They weren't looking for elegance, they were looking for iron fingers and shoulders that never quit. They understood that in the 4th hour of any struggle, the warrior still standing beats the warrior with the perfect form lying on the ground. Modern neuroscience confirms what these veterans knew instinctively. Coordination collapses under severe fatigue. When your grip begins to fail, your entire body enters a state of systemic alarm. You lose the ability to transmit force, your reaction time slows, and your perfect movements become telegraphed and brittle. Research suggests that grip strength is one of the most accurate predictors of combat endurance and even overall longevity, because it signals the health of the entire nervous system. And this is
why the advice to focus solely on working smarter, not harder, can be dangerous. If you build a perfectly sharpened mind but house it in a vessel made of clay, you are effectively preparing for a battle that only lasts 10 minutes. Most of life's most significant challenges, building a business, mastering a craft, or enduring a crisis, require you to function at a high level long after the initial adrenaline has faded. To prevent this internal collapse, the masters of old didn't just practice their craft. They engaged in a brutal conditioning process designed to change their very bone density and neural efficiency. They used the makiwara, a striking post, to create microdamage in their bones, forcing the body to lay down denser, stronger tissue. They carried heavy rocks to build total body power. They transformed their bodies into weapons that could execute imperfect techniques for 10 hours rather than perfect techniques for 10 minutes. But this training was about more than just muscle. It was about forging the spirit through the medium of physical resistance. Every time you twist a heavy weight until your forearms scream and you choose to finish the final 5 reps, you are not just building muscle, you are training your mind to remain calm when the body is in distress. You are learning to command a tool that wants to quit. This shift in perspective is what eventually saved Yamada's dojo. After Renjiro's death, the master realized he had been teaching a comfortable lie. He brought in veterans to teach his students how to be peasants first and samurai second. He taught them that strength is the platform upon which technique sits. Without the platform, the technique has nowhere to stand. You may not be heading into a sword fight, but you are heading into a world that will test your grip. You are fighting battles of focus, discipline, and purpose. And if you are losing, it might not be because you lack the skill. It might be because you are trying to fight an
11-hour war with a 1-hour body. The transition from being a student of theory to a practitioner of reality began the moment Yamada-sensei placed a stone chi-ishi in the hands of his remaining students. Their previous training had been silent, focused on the internal feeling of a perfect cut and the philosophy of the void. This new training was loud, grunting, and filled with the scent of sweat and iron. They were no longer just moving through space, they were moving against resistance. But here's the part most people miss. We often view physical conditioning as a separate chore, something we do at the gym so we can look a certain way. For the samurai, Hojo Undo was not about aesthetics. It was about forging the capacity to remain a thinking human being while the body is experiencing a crisis. This is where the risk quietly increases in our own lives. When we neglect the physical vessel, we are essentially lowering our threshold for stress. If you are physically unconditioned, a minor setback at work or a long day of mental focus will trigger the same biological quit response that Renjiro felt in hour 4. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow, and your ability to make rational, strategic decisions evaporates. You aren't failing because the problem is unsolvable. You're failing because your body has decided it is in a state of emergency and is shutting down your higher cognitive functions to save energy. Yamada's students spent months twisting those stones. Their forearms grew thick with functional muscle, that more importantly, their nervous systems became fatigue-resistant. They were learning the principle of the unified body. In the old dojo, they moved their arms and legs independently. Through stone carrying and tetsubo swinging, they learned to move from the core. They learned that power doesn't come from the limb, it comes from the ground, through a stable trunk, and into the tool. The data doesn't fail, our interpretation does.
We think we can think our way through exhaustion, but the neurobiology of fatigue is absolute. As your metabolic waste builds up, your brain physically struggles to send signals to your muscles. Conditioning is the process of teaching the body to clear that waste faster, and teaching the brain to keep sending those signals even when the feedback from the muscles is painful. By the time the next conflict arrived, these students were different men. When Kenji, one of Yamada's survivors, entered his first real battle, he didn't feel the frantic rush of adrenaline that usually leads to early burnout. He felt a deep, grounded stability. He fought for 2 hours, and then 3, and then 4. His technique was no longer as pretty as it had been in the dojo. His cuts were shorter, his movements more economical, but they were relentless. That assumption sounds logical until you look closer. We assume that the hero is the one who performs a spectacular feat of strength or skill at the climax of the story. In reality, the hero is often just the person who is 20% less tired than everyone else. Kenji won his most difficult engagement not by outthinking a superior opponent, but by simply outlasting him. He maintained his grip for 5 minutes longer than the other man could. In that 5-minute window, the opponent's form collapsed, his guard dropped, and the lesser technician Kenji found the opening. And this is why the advice to focus on talent sounds right, but can still be dangerous. Talent is a sprint, conditioning is the marathon. If you rely on talent, you are betting everything on a quick victory. If you rely on conditioning, you are prepared for the reality that life rarely gives you a quick victory. Yamada-sensei, watching his students return from battle alive, realized that the true secret of the samurai wasn't a hidden sword technique or a mystical scroll. It was the unglamorous, repetitive work of the forge. It was the willingness to be a peasant.
In the morning, so you could be a warrior in the afternoon. He realized that a warrior's dignity isn't found in avoiding hard labor, but in embracing it as the very thing that makes their dignity possible in a crisis. This lesson applies to every arena of human endeavor. Whether you are an athlete, a leader, or a student, your technique, your knowledge and skill is only as effective as the body that carries it. If you want your mind to stay sharp under pressure,
You must forge a body that doesn't scream for mercy the moment things get difficult. You must build your foundation on the stones and the iron of self-discipline. Renjiro's story is a tragedy because it was avoidable. He had the mind and the heart of a legend, but he was betrayed by a lack of basic physical preparation. Don't let your potential be cut short by a clay vessel. Start building your foundation today. It won't be elegant and it won't be easy, but it will be the reason you are still standing when everyone else has fallen. If you're ready to stop relying on theory and start building a body that can actually sustain your ambitions, I can help you outline a progressive discipline plan based on these principles. Would you like me to create a 30-day warrior foundation routine that integrates these concepts into your current schedule?